depends on where you're standing, what words you use. Emigre, French, or emigrant. Emigre.
But these two words are the English, right? But one is from French.
Yeah, you can use it. A lot of people do in referring to immigrants to say, oh, they're emigres. Oh, okay. It's kind of like a difference in sound. It's clearer. Emigre against immigrant. Emigrant and immigrant are pretty close. So, did he mean immigrant or emigrant? But if you say emigre, oh, emigrant. Emigrant. It's easier to understand in the sense that the pronunciation is more apart between emigre and immigrant as opposed to emigrant and immigrant.
We almost familiar with the one that begin with I-M, not E-M.
Well, no, immigrants coming in from a different country.
But I never see the begin with E in Thailand or in...
Well, in Thailand, unless you knew somebody that left Thailand to go to Indonesia or America or Australia, you wouldn't know any immigrants or emigres. You would know, but you would probably know immigrants coming from Cambodia or from Laos or from Myanmar or something like that, who have immigrated to Thailand. More likely, you would know something like that. Any questions about that? Everybody ready to take an examination in immigration or emigration? Okay. But again, that's why I recommend that the English language newspaper as a guide to help you understand these words. If you wouldn't be talking about the immigrants on ships, the migrants on ships. But if you look through the paper and see something, you can look it up in the dictionary and find an answer to a word that would help you with your vocabulary. Poverty. Absence of any money or any food, suffering from extreme poverty. Nothing. No housing, no food, no clothing, nothing. Extreme poverty. And that's why a lot of people leave whatever country they're suffering in with extreme poverty to go to someplace else. To have a better chance in life. Try one sentence on the situation in Hong Kong that we do today.
You are not me.
Okay, let's see how we come through here. The demonstrators, oh, that's all right, it should be demonstrators. Oh no, the demonstrations, right. The demonstrations were the latest in over 3 months of sometimes violent protests, with protesters angered by what they see as creeping interference. Creeping interference by Beijing in Hong Kong affairs. Despite promises by Beijing to grant the city wide-ranging autonomy and freedoms denied in mainland China. The demonstrations were the latest in over 3 months of sometimes violent protests, with protesters angered by what they see as creeping interference by Beijing in Hong Kong affairs, despite promises by Beijing to grant the city wide-ranging autonomy and freedoms denied in mainland China. Okay.
The demonstrations were the latest in over 3 months of sometimes violent protests, with protesters angered by what they see as creeping interference by Beijing in Hong Kong affairs, despite promises by Beijing to grant the city-wide ranking autonomy and freedoms denied in mainland China.
Right, very good. The demonstrations were the latest in over 3 months of sometimes violent protest, with protesters angered by what they see as creeping interference by Beijing in Hong Kong affairs, despite promises by Beijing to grant the city wide-ranging autonomy and freedoms denied in mainland China. Okay.
The demonstrations were the latest in over 3 months of sometimes violent protests, which protesters angered by what they see as creeping interference by Beijing in Hong Kong affairs, despite promises by Beijing to grant the city wide-ranging autonomy and freedoms denied in mainland China.
Right, very good. Very good job. Creeping interference by Beijing in Hong Kong affairs, despite promises by Beijing to grant wide-ranging autonomy, autonomy, wide-ranging autonomy, and freedoms denied in mainland China. Okay.
The demonstrations were the latest in over 3 months of sometimes violent protests, with protesters angered by what they see as creeping interference by Beijing in Hong Kong affair, despite promises by Beijing to grant the city wide-ranging autonomy and freedoms denied in mainland China.
Right, very good. Good job. Creeping interference. Creeping interference by Beijing in Hong Kong affairs. Despite promises by Beijing to grant the city wide-ranging autonomy and freedom denied in mainland China. Okay.
The demonstrations were the last in over 3 months of sometimes violent protests, with protesters angered by what they see as creeping interference by Beijing in Hong Kong affairs, despite promise by Beijing to grant the city wide-ranging autonomy and freedoms denied in mainland China.
Right, very good. Good job. Creeping interference by Beijing in Hong Kong affairs, despite promises by Beijing to grant the city wide-ranging autonomy and freedoms denied in mainland China. Go ahead.
The demonstrations were the lasted in over 3 months of sometimes violent protests. This protesters angry by what they see as creeping interference by Beijing in Hong Kong affairs, despite promise by Beijing to grant the city wide-ranging autonomy and freedoms denied in mainland China.
Right, very good. The demonstrations were the latest. L like L-A-Y-T-E-S-T. Latest. In over 3 months of sometimes violent protest, with protesters angered by what they see as the creeping interference creeping interference by Beijing in Hong Kong affairs. Okay?
The demonstrations were the latest in over 3 months of sometimes violent protests, with protesters angered by what they see as creeping interference by Beijing in Hong Kong affairs, despite promises by Beijing to grant the city wide-ranging autonomy and freedoms denied in mainland China.
Yes, very good. Wide-ranging autonomy. 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 Wide-ranging autonomy and freedoms denied in mainland China. Creeping interference. Okay?
The demonstration were the latest in over 3 months of sometimes violent protests, with protesters angry by what they see as creeping interference by Beijing in Hong Kong affair, despite promise by Beijing to grant system-wide ranking autonomy and freedoms denied in mainland China.
Right, very good. Creeping interference. Creeping interference. Violent protests. Wide-ranging autonomy and freedoms denied in mainland China. Okay.
The demonstrations were the latest in over 3 months of sometimes violent protests, with protesters angered by what they see as creeping interference by Beijing in Hong Kong affair. They with promises by Beijing to grant to city-wide ranging autonomy and freedom denied in mainland China.
Right, freedoms denied in mainland China. Freedoms denied. The demonstrations, the almost weekly, well actually every week for the last 3 months, usually on either Saturday or Sunday. The demonstrations, rah, 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 marching, 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 thousands and thousands, sometimes 1 million people marching, were the latest, the most recent. The ones that happened this past Sunday were the most recent, the latest, in over 3 months of sometimes violent protest, fighting with police, throwing bricks, throwing petrol bombs at the police, sometimes violent, sometimes peaceful, just marching, 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 other times, woo, violent. With protesters upset and angry, with protesters angered, mad, by what they see as creeping interference. What is creeping? Creeping. Creeping. Creeping would be slowly, 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 creep, creep, creep. Somebody is creeping in the room, moving slowly. Creeping interference. So what they're saying is that China is slowly, slowly, slowly interfering, taking this, and then maybe a week later taking that away, and this away, and blocking that, and this, and that. Slowly, slowly, slowly. Not coming in with an army and saying, stop everything, it's over. No. Creeping, creeping, creeping. Creeping interference by Beijing in Hong Kong affairs, the matters that take place in Hong Kong. Beijing is slowly, slowly interfering. Despite promises, despite Beijing saying, don't worry, we promise to grant the city wide-ranging autonomy. What is wide-ranging autonomy? Wide-ranging, a very broad, a very wide-ranging, very wide, broad autonomy. What is autonomy? Self-rule. Hong Kong running itself. Hong Kong ruling itself. What the people in Hong Kong do is what the people in Hong Kong decide to do, not what China decides people in Hong Kong should do. Autonomy, self-rule. Hong Kong ruling Hong Kong, not China creeping in to take over Hong Kong. No. Wide-ranging freedom of Hong Kong. Autonomy, self-rule. Hong Kong rules Hong Kong, not China ruling Hong Kong. Not yet, anyway. And freedoms denied in mainland China. So they promised that they would grant the freedoms to Hong Kong that they deny in mainland China. The internet, maybe, or something like that. No internet, or this or that, or they control it, or whatever. Any questions about the words? Wide-ranging autonomy. Total freedom is what the Hong Kong people say that China promised. But they are starting to creep into Hong Kong affairs, to interfere. Latest in over 3 months, the most recent in over 3 months, the demonstrations. Any questions about that?
This fight pretty close, even though, although
Again,
this fight
despite,
is
oh,
pretty close, meaning although or even though.
right. By what they see as creeping interference by Beijing in Hong Kong affairs, even though the Chinese promised to grant the city wide-ranging autonomy. Despite the fact, they see the fact, but no, we forget about that. Despite the fact, we're doing this. So they see creeping interference, even though Beijing promised that they would not interfere. They said they wouldn't, but despite that, get rid of that fact, we're interfering. So despite, even though they promised to, by Beijing, to not interfere. So you could use that in the place of despite.
Let's change a little bit. If a change from despite to be even though, or though, just change a little bit
Well,
Sentence
I think
after
despite may be a stronger word, a little bit stronger than even though. Despite, and despite, you're saying that they threw away the promises, even though they promised. Despite promises, it's pretty much the same meaning. So they are creeping interference by Beijing in Hong Kong affairs, even though promises were made by Beijing to grant wide-ranging autonomy. Beijing and Hong Kong affairs, despite promises by Beijing to grant wide-ranging autonomy. Pretty much the same idea. Despite means they're taking something and throwing it away, getting rid of it. In this case, they're getting rid of the promises that they said they would make promises, and now they're saying, oh, sorry, didn't mean it. Despite.
China tell a lie.
What?
China never lie.
No, right, never lies, right, yeah, right. We always keep our promises. Well, Hong Kong saying it, oh no you don't, you're not keeping these promises. So despite the promises by Beijing, they're not doing it. Creeping interference, slowly interrupting things in Hong Kong. Wide-ranging autonomy, wide-ranging self-rule. Don't interfere, we can handle our own business. Latest, the most recent, violent. Yeah, they used force. Not peaceful, they used force. Or tried to anyway. Any other questions then? Understand the idea, wide-ranging autonomy, wide-ranging broad self-rule. Hong Kong ruling Hong Kong, not China telling us what to do. Wide-ranging autonomy, despite promises. Even though they made promises, they're not following the promise. Okay? All right, if you have any questions, just let me know, we'll talk about it. Okay, we'll pick up where we left off the other day. And on this list of words, the words are very short, and there's only maybe one letter difference. So that's why pronunciation is very important, and to concentrate, I'll give the meanings of the words, of course, but is to concentrate on the pronunciation, even though they're only one letter different. Okay, here we go. Sell. Sell. Sell.
Sell.
Sell. Sell.
Sell.
Tell. Tell.
Tell.
Bell.
Tell.
Bell.
Tell.
Fell. Fell.
Tell.
Well.
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 Not well, but well. Well. Yell.
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 Del.
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 Pell mell.
Del.
Pell mell.
Pell mell.
Right. Very good.
Del.
What is fell?
For a